Because in the past, China may see that wars and revolutionaries has been sort of the theme of the world. But since the opening and the reform policy started, China has changed its perception of the world. Now China sees the world as in the theme of, say, peace and development. This is China's assessment, not necessarily say agreed by people from other countries, you know. So, but anyway, it's important because that's the basis for China's government, for China's journalists, for China's academics to make their decisions, to look at the world. So this is, I think, very clear, and I think that in this kind of, say, foreign policy principle, China can reassure other countries about the future direction of China as a nation.
Let me ask you about two weak areas in which the international world perceives China. One is Tibet and the other is Taiwan. I mean, not all countries understand China's position. How do you deal with critics that charge China about how it is dealing with the problem of Tibet and Taiwan?
Well, I think that it is understandable that China and other countries, especially advanced countries in Europe and North America, had very much different opinions over such issues as Taiwan and Tibet. I think this might be related to the different situations within these countries. Because for US and European countries, for example, for them, sovereignty or territorial integrity is no longer a national priority. It's no longer on the political agenda for their nations. So the major priority for their, say, leaders is about human rights. It's about religious freedom. It's about ethnic minorities. That's understandable. For China, on such issues like Tibet and Taiwan, of course, it's still on China's top political agenda because they are related to China's core interests, which we define, because it's about China's territorial integrity. It's about sovereignty. And it's also related based on China's, say, moral, say, perspective over the world order. Because these issues, from Chinese perspectives, these issues originated from the immoral, say, colonial history, sort of, say, but China should still has the task of protecting its territory from any international influence, international, say, forces. This might be the perspective of some Chinese people. It might be a little bit difficult to be understood by people in US, in other, say, European countries. And one more thing is that it's much easier to talk about Tibet, for example, in Europe, than really, say, to face the problem and find some ways to cope with this problem. Actually, for example, Tibet is an issue of territory, it's an issue of religion, it's an issue of ethnic minority. So all the most difficult problems that many countries face, that China is faced now in Tibet. So I really want, I would not say that Chinese government's policies on these issues are 100% correct. We may make mistakes, but that's understandable. And I really want that people from other countries understand the difficulty, sometimes dilemma, that the Chinese government is facing. So that's my, say, personal perspective, but really it's very difficult.
Well, coming from an Asian country, I call it the process of growing up, of maturity, because I think almost all Asian countries, like you say, having been under the colonial yoke, can feel it, can understand. But others would say it's not justifiable.
Yeah.
On a personal note, as a professor, as a teacher of young students, how would you like young Chinese people to understand China's international relations?
Well, Well, of course, I have many, say, expectations for the young generation, for my students. For example, I want them to have more interest in knowing other countries. But this is not actually, I need not to be afraid of this, because current Chinese young generation are just very much enthusiastic about knowing the outside world. That's very good. And one point I would like to raise is that related to our first question, is about the national identity or nationalism. Because this young generation is still educated and grown up in a sort of patriotic atmosphere. This, from a Chinese perspective, I think this is understandable and justifiable. Because until very recently, China still had very difficult relations with the major powers in the world. Still feel the uncertainty, the insecurity when dealing with other countries. So this kind of patriotic feeling sentiment, I think, is sort of justifiable. But we have to look at the other side of this kind of feelings, because they may pose negative image of China. They may also affect Chinese domestic agenda. Because when people were too, say, emotionally or ideologically possessed with such idea of patriotism or nationalism, we may lose the top agenda, the major goal, that is our economic development. So I think that my expectation, hope for the young generation is that you can have a national identity, a patriotism in your heart, but at the same time, you should have a global identity. You should understand that China's peace and prosperity should be also depending on the peace and prosperity of the world. That China's sort of destination is closely related to the destination of the whole world. I think, but I myself was sort of optimistic about the future, because when I see that more and more Chinese people, students, having say increasingly much exchanges to the outside world, they may understand the world much better than their, say, the older generation. They will have similar sort of culture tendencies, say, culture preferences with Southeast Asian countries people and with, say, Northeast Asian countries, a young generation. They may be like the same sort of cartoons. They may be like the same sort of pop culture. Not only pop culture, actually, even at the elite level, as I have already said, the elites, academics, journalists, or government officials, there are simply so much interaction between them on various international occasions. And through these sort of interactions, a global identity can be developed paralleled to the national identity. I would not go that far as to say the global identity will replace the national identity, but at least I think we should have a balance between these different identities.
That would be the ideal.
Yes, but that's our goal. We should make efforts to do this. Yeah.
Well, on that note, Dr. Gui, thank you very much for your time with us. It's been a very stimulating dialogue.
Thank you. Thank you very much.